Good afternoon. Welcome to the Talent Parent Programme Being a Parent in Elite Sport webinar. Hopefully you'll be able to hear myself, and as we progress through this webinar, you should be able to see the presentation as well. For those of you who have not accessed a webinar before, during the webinar, please ensure that you have yourself muted and that your camera is turned off during the presentation. There should be a red mic button at the top of your screen to enable this. For those who are listening through the phone, please also ensure that you have yourself muted as well. Before we start, I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Daniel Thompson and I am the Talent Programme Administration Officer for British Canoeing. My primary role is managing the day-to-day administration and operational delivery of our England Talent Programme. I'm also leading on this newly developed Talent Parent Programme. In the room with myself is Rich Ransdale, who is Head of Talent. Rich currently manages the talent pathway across both canoe slalom and canoe sprint and is responsible for the strategic delivery of these programmes. I'd like to start by thanking you all for accessing this webinar today. Given the key role that parents play in informing and impacting athlete development, the England Talent Programme are delighted to be launching a Talent Parent Programme for the parents of our Talent Programme athletes. This programme will better engage, support parents in the sometimes difficult and often underappreciated role they play in the development of our talent athletes. The Talent Parent Programme comprises of a curriculum delivered by webinar workshops. It will address key topic areas such as nutrition, psychology, youth physiology, anti-doping, etc. We'll have useful links and videos and signposting documents, as well as a series of presentations from parents of current or ex-athletes. This webinar, along with additional resources, will be uploaded onto the recently launched Talent Parent Programme webpage a couple of days later. Today, Rich will be presenting the Being a Parent or Carer in Elite Sport webinar. I will now pass over to Rich.
Thanks, Daniel. As Daniel's just said, my name's Rich. I'm the Head of Talent for the England Talent Programme. I've been a coach for around 10 to 15 years, and I'm the parent to two very young children, both of which are in nappies, so the challenges that I face on a day-to-day are very different to the challenges that you face on a day-to-day. What follows is a brief introduction to the parent programme and a bit more of a specific look at the role of the parent and carer. If you have questions, feel free to add them into that chat on the right-hand side, and I'll hopefully be able to address them throughout the presentation, or if not directly at the very end. Just to sort of clarify the language that I'm going to use throughout the presentation, I'm going to use the word parent, but it refers equally to parent, guardian, or carer, or primary caregiver. So I'm kind of not trying to distinguish or diminish one from the other, but for ease of understanding, I'm just going to use the word parent. So the first thing I would like to do is actually ask the question why. So why have this parent programme? So if we consider how an athlete develops and what are the significant impacts, we can see a number of stakeholders or influencers that drive this progression over the lifetime of a paddler. And if we look at it as a graph, if we consider performance progression as broadly the track of an athlete developing through their career to success or eventual retirement from elite sport, and programme ownership on the other axis as an indication of who is driving what is done, when and where, we can see that the athlete starts off at a pretty low level. Initially, in their early years of sport participation, they have very little impact on their sport or their development. They may influence, pester, or show interest in certain activities, but ultimately, the day-to-day doing is something that is decided for them. As their performances progress, we see that the level of influence or ownership increases to the point whereby which they could become a key driver of their programme. So this is something that within the talent space we try to prepare our athletes for and equip them so that they have the capacity and the skills to be able to do so when that time comes right for them. The coach is another key significant aspect that influences athlete development, whether this is a club or a formalised development programme coach. They have a significant impact on the development of the athlete and drive the day-to-day doing. All good coaching should focus around an athlete-centred model of learning, ultimately seeking at an appropriate point to prepare the athlete and pass on program ownership to the athlete. So we can see that later down the line, the actual athlete becomes, the greater impactor on their program, and the coach actually takes a bit more of a. The biggest influencer from a very early age of developing is the parent. They're the ones that decide which sport the child will engage with, which sports to persevere with, the extent to which the child's level of involvement will extend to, before we even start to unpick the implicit actions and influences and beliefs that they actually pass on to their child. The role played by the parent will vary throughout the athlete's career, with direct influence decreasing over time as the athlete or child develops their capacities and their ownerships on their own rate. This is similar to the way in which a parent would prepare and support their child academically. So supporting them, very directly in the early years as they're sort of at primary school, as they progress through secondary school, and how that support would kind of contrast to the support in which the parent actually provides at a university or a higher education level. Very much they're there as the safety net, as the bank, as the sort of the key person that's there to sort of support them when the real challenges hit. Even though your role in your child's athletic development may decrease, your role as a parent, though, continues and will remain influential in this journey. In the sporting context, we see a predominant amount of our elite athletes still have their parents travel out to support them at world or European level or Olympic events. And, they're there in the background supporting the athlete, even at the highest level. But that support is radically different to what they would support in the initial stages. So this is a really good photo of Joe Clark post-Olympic medal ceremony in Rio in 2016 with his dad. Being a parent is not easy. We, as the programme, are not the experts in your child. No one can claim this other than you. You're the person that has to spend the time with them or spends time with them. It's not the purpose of this programme to be anything else. We're trying to help and support the team around the athlete, and parents are instrumental and a critical part of this team. As a programme, we recognise that we can do more to help, inform and support the people that spend the most amount of time with our athletes. Not every athlete will make the step to the GB team or a world-class programme, but it is our intention that all athletes will be better people as a result of their time in our programmes, and this parent programme is designed to help support this process. So a quick overview that Daniel's alluded to initially. The programme has been informed through market research. So, previous parents have been canvassed for their opinion. We've gone to parents, to coaches, to expert practitioners. We've also engaged in academic research, and we've looked at best practice across the sector. A one-size-fits-all programme isn't suitable, and research has recommended a series of workshops or modules to target different levels of sporting experience. Actually parents being treated as a homogenous group, all the same is definitely not the right way to go about things. So what we've got here is effectively our modules of support that we're going to deliver, and beyond that, the coaching group and the support around the athlete will look to unpick the meaning and the impact at a local level, what that means for them day to day. There are three elements to the programme, the first of which is the curriculum of education, as I've sort of already highlighted in advance of when I should have clicked it. There's 12 modules of education delivered by webinar. A range of practitioners and staff will be delivering on these, so you won't just be hearing my dull voice. We're also linking in other past parents through networking events. And all this is going to be underpinned by a new website section on our main British Canoeing site in order to support and host all this information. So, being a parent in elite sport, hopefully got an example here that will help. It's interesting to sort of demonstrate.
Keep it going, mate. Get back and go.
something that was recently in the news. Definitely not suggesting this is best practice. But the overzealous dad there encouraging his child to save the goal by pushing him to the floor. And the look of indignation on the kid as he walks off after his dad's tried to help him with the best of intent, but actually not achieving the outcome that he wanted. It's in the news, and it's something that, you know, the role of the parent is a challenging one. I put the subheading there, developing an autonomous passion, and hopefully I'm going to sort of help demonstrate that as the key principal role of parent at any level within sport over the next coming slides. I mean, it goes without saying that sporting success or the realization of potential doesn't come overnight. Development takes time and a huge level of investment and resilience, which are topics in other webinars. The level of investment required from the athlete cannot be underestimated, and it cannot come through someone else. It has to come from the athlete. And if they are to stand any chance of success, and equally to learn those important life lessons, resilience, commitment, etc. The key thing here to emphasize is that parents play a huge part in helping their child to realize a love and commitment for their sport, which will ultimately lead them to investing the sufficient effort that is required to develop something, to develop. And this is something that we're going to look at over the next coming slides. So when researching this area, there were a number of interesting reads and quotes that I came across. The quote from the late Enzo Calzaghe, who's the father of the boxing champion Joe Calzaghe, was particularly pertinent, and it typifies the balance that we see many parents trying to achieve. And quite literally, it kind of rings true in the case of the video that we've just shared. You know, people say you shouldn't push your children, but, you know, if you don't do that, who will? Now, obviously, the guy on the football pitch has literally pushed his child to the ground, and it's finding that balance. A highly recommendable book is The Goldmine Effect by Rasmus Ankerson, and he talks about, you know, this concept of not pushing your child being irresponsible. And Rasmussen's book actually talks about the lengths of which some parents go to in order to realise the potential in their children. And he presents some really extreme examples of hungry parents in Russian tennis and South Korean golf. And these parents are trying to realise a better life for their children. And the context adds a certain pressure, leading to some extreme cases. So one parent camping out in a graveyard with their child to help build confidence, or one Korean golf parent who was quoted as saying, "If I don't push my child to play golf and hit balls for hours on end at a driving range, they will never find out whether they can be good at it." It's a very provocative statement, but the argument is interesting. To master a skill requires a substantial amount of effort and investment. Left to their own devices, a child might take a long time to discover their passion, or they may never truly discover their passion. A child is not able to make a fully informed decision to become a top performer because they have no frame of reference, and they don't have any idea of what they're letting themselves in for. Many children come to enjoy the activities chosen for them, and they come to build a passion along the way from the inherent mastery of that task. I think the takeaway here is that the extent of encouragement and level of involvement is a very difficult balance. And there is a very sort of fine line between encouragement and pushing. And that is something that a lot of parents struggle with. The extent to this involvement can vary and depend on a variety of individual and environmental factors, and can be likened to a curriculum, or a continuum, that ranges from over-involvement at one end to under-involvement at the other end. Both conditions may negatively influence the sporting experience of young athletes, and the literature tells us that where that parent sits on this continuum can depend on a number of things. So the youth sport context, for instance, so the competitiveness of the system, the level of investment required, and the desire to ensure that this investment isn't wasted or is later regretted as a childhood missed, is something that weighs heavily on the demand on the kind of the thought process of parents' involvement. Other parents and coaches, so protecting, some parents may become overly involved or become involved through a fear of protecting their child from poor coaching or from other parents' influences on their own children. Their influence might be impacted by the concerns regarding their own behaviour, so they might be kind of worried about appearing overly pushy, being a slave driver, or being overly intrusive in their child's sport. Knowledge and experience of sport. So this could both be a help and a hindrance. Knowing what sport is, or having gone through a similar system, might be a help for some parents. It might equally be a hindrance. And having no idea what competitive sport is about might equally be a hindrance. And the goals and belief about sport in general, the actual value in sport, its participation, parents seeking teachable moments or specific development experiences, and worries about forsaking academic focus are all things that are impacted by the parents' goals and beliefs about their participation in sport. And we can see that this is a bit of a balancing act. I think where you sit on that continuum will vary. Some points will require a little bit of involvement. Others will require a bit of a stand back and kind of let teachable moments happen. Ultimately, the end goal is to support a love for the sport, and the balance of the individual may shift from one end to another. A good example from a past slalom athlete, their parents have always talked about supporting the athlete to 95%. So they've matched the athlete's commitment at 95%. So they've never gone above and beyond the level of which the athlete has actually invested into their sport. Purely because as soon as they got to a point where they were the ones driving the program, it was no longer the athlete's sport, it was their sport. And they were very conscious and made a very active decision not to engage past that. I reflect on my own experiences. My parents had no knowledge or experience of elite sport, so they were very much on the under-involved end of the spectrum. And although that never led to any kind of meaningful success in sport, I think it did teach me a dramatic life lesson. If I wanted to go somewhere, if I wanted to do something, it was all down to me. I was the person having to pack the car the night before, make sure the boats were on, make sure lunch was sorted. If I wanted to make it happen, I had to make it happen, and I had to drive my program, which, hasn't led to success, as I say, but actually it has taught me valuable life lessons. The athlete team is a crucial part in facilitating an aspirant athlete's love and passion and enthusiasm for sport. And as in any high-performing team, communication and empathy are all essential components to ensure that effective and healthy relationships amongst its members. So when we return this back to the balancing act, it's about the relationships between the parent athlete and the coach in order to achieve the balance and the appropriateness for any given time. The best way to build relationships is to understand other people's perspectives. So a good example that psychs will often use is the example of the blind men elephant analogy. So we can see, an elephant approached from very different ways by these individuals comes with very, very different perceptions of what they're actually dealing with and what they're looking at. The guy at the end who thinks you're dealing with a bit of rope might be surprised to hear that someone's squealing at the front because they think they're dealing with a snake. Either way, the elephant definitely knows it's being misunderstood. It's not, at no point is it actually a true reflection on what's actually in front of them. I think there's some good examples of perspectives in the next couple of quotes that come from a variety of different sources, so literature and a couple of different bits from a bit of internet research. So I'll just let you read through those and I'll stop talking for a couple of seconds. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to read through all that. Some interesting examples and very, very clear differences in perspectives. The hockey player example was quite a funny one to read through. And again, they're all extreme versions. We return back to our elephant analogy. A good rule of thumb, whenever you're feeling frustrated or disappointed by your child, other parents, or a member of staff, is to put yourself in their position. What has caused them to make this decision or to behave in this way? What was their intent? Are your feelings an emotional response, and will we feel the same tomorrow? Are all questions that whenever I'm frustrated are things that I'm always trying to return back to. It's important to be mindful about how others might perceive your communication style, and it's also to remember that sometimes others will not communicate in a way that suits your preference. As coaches, we do a lot of training on communication, but it's not a simple topic, and we're continually trying to be better at this, especially with our interactions with athletes, parents, and staff. We provide some further reading on this topic in the resources section of the Parent Programme webpage. I'd encourage you to take some time to consider your own styles and those of your children and those of your coach. And if your styles do differ, how could you adopt strategies to improve your interactions? I think even the point here is actually just to sort of have that conversation. And, you might find that even by just having that conversation, it's something that actually opens up potentially a can of worms, but then also potentially helps you understand things a little bit better. So what? So I've babbled on for sort of 25 minutes. What's the point? What am I saying? I think the role of the parent is primarily to help develop an autonomous passion in your child. The child athlete needs to be self-motivated and self-driven. Helping to foster and build an internal love of the sport and build a solid base of healthy psychological skills is the key role of a sporting parent. And as a parent, you can help your child athlete maintain his or her motivation, but you can't create it for them. And striving to provide your child with that optimum push, a mix of unconditional support and parental motivation is the key thing to sort of to focus. Recognizing that optimum push will change as your child ages as well, and will be dependent on the context, and it will vary from child to child. Focusing on your child's specific journey through the sport, their needs rather than comparing to others. Youth sport development is massively individual, and no one person develops at the same rate or in the same manner or needs the same level of input as someone else. And actually focusing on the child's specific journey is the most productive sort of focus of effort. Reinforce the value and the connectivity between hard work and achievement. Help athletes understand and value that hard work does generate gains as a result. And follow through, and probably the practical advice here is help kids follow through on short-term commitments, especially during the early years, because I feel definitely through my coaching experience, we'd set challenges around low-hanging fruit in order to actually make people aware that, if I invest at a certain task, I will get better. It's not always as simple as that, but it helped. We picked off stuff that was really, really simple to do and helped actually sort of whet people's appetites for doing the more arduous sort of graft that's required later down the line. Engage in the development environment and process. So engage with your coach, ask them questions, be open with them, tell them when things don't make sense, ask them how you can help, and tell them what you need from them to help in the process. I love this acronym. To fail is the first attempt in learning. Help your child cope with failure and frustration. Help them see setbacks as a normal and helpful part of striving for and achieving success. Coping and normalizing failure and frustration, because no one's got better through not failing. and it's part of the athletic development process that it's unavoidable. And maintain a focus on development and enjoyment, especially during the early years. Allow the child to be a child, especially during the early years of involvement in activities. Let your child know you value he or she as they are, not just what he or she does and what she can accomplish. And have fun and enjoy the experience. Our sport is an amazing sport. It opens up a connectivity to the environment. It connects you with the rest of the country. You go through amazing experiences, and you develop and grow as a result of that. And there's benefits to the parents as much to the children and to the family as well, if a positive balance can be sought. So I think it's important to remember that actually the key reason most people get involved in this is because they enjoyed the experience when they first walked through the Canoe Club door, and that's something that we don't want to sort of lose that. So I hope that's been useful. A few questions that were populated pre-event I'll address in a couple of minutes, but in the chat little panel on the right hand side, if anyone has any questions that they want to ask directly, I can try my best to address them while we're online at the minute. So if you kind of pop in bottom right hand corner where it says to everyone, if you put in any comments or questions that you want addressing there, I'll be happy to answer, or try my best to answer. The questions that were highlighted initially were around finance, sponsorship and balance. I'm going to sidestep a couple of them. In terms of finance and sponsorship, we recognise that this is an area that people want more help in. So there's a section that's launched on the parent website where Daniel's done a really good job on actually collecting and putting in one place where there's opportunities for funding sources. So the various different campaigns that are regionally based or nationally based, and what who they're open for, who the eligibility is, and there's potential sources of finance or signposting for finance in that section. In terms of how do we balance family life, how do we balance a hectic just life in general, I think that is something that's specific to the individual, and it's not something that we can really sort of address in a group setting like this, because it'll depend on the location, depend on facility access you've got, it will depend on a whole host of things. What I would encourage is that your attendance to the elite parent presentations that our past parents present. I think if you kind of link into there'll be some interesting examples of how they've managed it as a unit. And the last one that was presented by Andy Hounslow and Anne Hounslow was reasonably informative to that. Because they had 3 kids at the time, 2 of which were slalom athletes, one of which was into a little bit of horse riding, the cheapest of sports. So actually, there's a little bit there to sort of learn from previous experiences. But I think that's definitely something that would need to come from a parent directly, and a bit of shared understanding, and asking them how they've managed it, because it's going to have to be down to the parent and the family unit to actually get to that level of understanding, and how they kind of reach that compromise, or that level of how they find that optimum balance. If there's no further questions, I'm going to hand over to Daniel to conclude, and I think we'll be sending out a feedback form to sort of hopefully get an idea on whether this initial presentation has hit the mark. And we're always open to sort of learn from the process, so welcome your comments on that.
So thank you there, Rich, for leading that presentation on being a parent or carer in elite sport. So just a couple of summary points from what you've just mentioned there. So you've talked about the role of the parent, helping to develop an autonomous passion in your child there. We talked about the fine line between encouragement and pushing. It's a balancing act there with parents. We touched a little bit on communication styles and understanding each other's perspectives, whether that be a coach or your child in general. There'll be further reading on the Talent Parent Programme website around this area on communication styles, so I encourage you to have a look at that. Finally, just talked about the parent being part of that athlete team, which that athlete team being the athlete, the parent and the coach, and your engagement in the development and environment process of that there. So thank you for everyone who has tuned in to listen to this webinar today. As Rich mentioned, we will be sending out feedback form. So we encourage you, if you could spend 5 minutes of your time to complete that form, any thoughts that you have on this webinar and how it went. In the meantime, I encourage you to have a look at our Talent Parent Programme website, and in a couple of days' time, we'll be uploading this webinar along with additional resources. So thank you all for tuning in and have a good evening. Yes, the question regarding the website address. So I'll just currently share the screen with you and load up the British Canoeing website. So underneath Olympic and Paralympic, this tab here, if we scroll further down, there's a section which is Talent Programme. And on that section, the Talent Programme is split up into either sprint or slalom, depending on where your son or daughter, what discipline they compete in. And here, this section here says is the Talent Parent Programme. So that is where the website is. And on here, the opening page is the list of the curriculum that we'll be delivering and the delivery date for these different areas. So they're all listed there. And on the webinars and video resources section page, this is where we will be uploading all the webinars after we've done them. So in the Being a Role in Elite Sport webinar, that will be over there. Yeah. And in terms of the sponsorship document that Richard outlined earlier on, that's on the additional information and resources tab, and there's a download for funding sources available. So thank you all for tuning in today, and hope you've gained some useful information from this webinar, and look forward to hearing your thoughts in the future, and for you guys to tune in to our next webinar, which will be the role planning in sport webinar, which will be taking place next Thursday. So thank you.